Welcome to the Real Deal Smite God Reveal, featuring Cernunnos, the Celtic god of seasons.
Your inevitable death is all part of nature's plan.
Like with Fenrir, I decided to give Cernunnos a better title than what Hi-Rez gave. I mean, Cernunnos is a god that controls the seasons and is part of nature. And what did they title him? After his fucking antlers. Jeez, Hi-Rez, you couldn't drop the ball any harder if you deliberately threw it off the side of a cliff. Whatever, so I couldn't figure a good comparison for Cernunnos except maybe Udyr and Lulu from League of Legends, but I felt that I was kinda stretching it at that point. Ah well, make of it what you will. Let's get into his kit then, shall we? Cernunnos' passive is Heavy Glaive. Cernunnos wields a glaive as a weapon. His basic attacks deal 25% additional basic attack damage to all enemies in melee range while he is throwing it. The additional damage from Heavy Glaive does not trigger any effects from items or abilities. It also cannot critical strike. Now, when I first read this passive, I thought that he just did an extra 25% damage when he's close to his target, but this extra wording didn't make much sense to me. So I did some research into this, and by that I mean I saw the demonstration video on the Smite wiki. So what happens is that when Cernunnos is in melee range, a new damage counter appears. So the passive is counted as its own damage and isn't calculated with Cernunnos' auto attacks. Or to put it more simply, it's a shitty Erlong Shen passive. Man, why didn't Hi-Rez just say that to begin with? Could have saved a lot of time and confusion. Fuck it. As is, this passive is okay, but it's counterproductive. ADCs are meant to keep as much distance from the enemy as they can, since ADCs are squishy and can get one-shotted by any god in the game. It's an okay buff though, I guess. Cernunnos' one is Shifter of Seasons. Cernunnos imbues his glaive with the power of the 4 seasons. Activating this ability rotates him through the 4 different bonuses to his basic attacks. Spring Growth gives 15% physical lifesteal, Summer Heat gives 25 plus 20% extra physical damage, Autumn Decay reduces enemy physical protections by 25 for 5 seconds, Winter Chill slows enemies by 15% for 1 second. Okay, this ability pisses me off. It's basically a Xbalanque one with Kronos' passive combined, minus the drawbacks of either one of those abilities. And no one at Hi-Rez took a step back and said, hey, wait a sec. Yeah, like, what else can I really say? It's a stupid broken ability that makes building Cernunnos that much easier compared to other ADCs. And ADCs are the easiest class to build for. You don't have to worry about lifesteal, you have inbuilt pen, extra damage, and you can get Frostalis just by building Haste and Fatalist. I guess the only negative thing I could think of would be that you can't have all 4 passive at once, which is a whiny 12-year-old complaint. Although I do like spinning the wheel really fast. Whee! Cernunnos' 2 is Bramble Blast. Cernunnos fires a bramble forward in a line that routes a single enemy hit for 1 second. Upon hitting an enemy, wall, or reaching max range, it will explode, dealing 200 plus 75% of Cernunnos' physical damage and spawning an area of brambles at the location. This area deals 20 plus 5% of Cernunnos' physical damage every 0.5 seconds and persists for 5 seconds. As a lane clear, this ability is really good. In fact, it was too good since it used to apply a slow, which was pure AIDS. This ability is great at ranged poking, but something to keep in mind is that the root effect will only apply if it hits someone while the skill shot is traveling and not when it explodes. Yeah, that's about it. Next. Cernunnos' 3 is Horn Charge. Cernunnos charges forward, dealing 290 plus 80% of Cernunnos' physical damage and crashes through all types of enemies. This ability can be cast every 13 seconds at max rank. Yeah, not much to say about this, it's just a damaging dash. You know, I think this is the only ADC escape that isn't completely forgiving and overloaded to shit. It doesn't make Cernunnos invisible afterwards, it doesn't give him CC immunity, it doesn't give him extra attack speed. Wow, that's a first. The only complaint I guess I would have is that the dash is so vanilla it's uninteresting, but as I said, seeing how ADCs always get the best escape tools in the game, I'm not complaining, fuck 'em. Cernunnos' ult is the Wild Hunt. Cernunnos selects an area where the Wild Hunt will begin. After a 1 second delay, enemies in the area will take 400 plus 90% of Cernunnos' physical damage and polymorphed into wild boars for 2 seconds. Polymorph targets are silenced and disarmed. Polymorph is not affected by diminishing returns. Hi-Rez, for fuck's sakes, why do you guys keep giving ADCs crowd control on par with Guardians and Warriors? And why is there so much stuff involving ADCs and pigs of all things? I swear it's starting to get to be on par with Invader Zim. Oh, by the way, hashtag Soonish hype. What the fuck ever. So yeah, this ult is extremely good for the obvious reason of lockdown and control that ADCs apparently need in copious amounts. Although the description does mention this thing called diminishing returns. What the fuck does that thing mean? Well, diminishing returns is a mechanic in Smite that isn't talked about very much, but is very important. Smite is a very crowd control heavy game, and what this mechanic does is help players who are repeatedly hit by CC in a short time frame not suffer the full effect. In Smite, if a player is hit by CC within 15 seconds of another CC, the crowd control will only last 66% of the time it normally would, and if the player is hit again, it will only last for 33% of what it normally would be until those 15 seconds have passed. That said, there are forms of CC that are unaffected by this mechanic like knock up, knock back, grabs, and pulls. These forms of CC will always do the full duration as stated, but it will still activate the mechanic for future crowd control effects. Same goes for banishes, but they don't activate this mechanic. This is why in Smite it's better to use a stun effect first before a knock-up effect. So what does this all mean? It means Cernunnos' ult is more bullshit than you initially thought it was, since the effect will always last 2 seconds unless you beads out of it. So can someone tell me why ADCs need crowd control again? Well, that's Cernunnos for you. He is one of, if not the easiest hunter to play in Smite. All of his abilities are really straightforward, and the only complications he has is what position his one should be in. Ah well, pick him up sometime. He is really good right now, but I found him really boring. But hey, at least I got to talk about a mechanic that isn't brought up very much. That's gotta count for something, right?